the esteemed community Flutter Valsad. Arpit?
So Maliha Nan is SD intern at BNY Mellon, and she's also been Meta Microsoft Learn Student Ambassador. She's also the core team member and mobile development team head at DSC DDU and co-organizer at Valsad. You really get such talents at such small ages, and we'll be lucky to have her with us today. And we look forward to an insightful session. I hope you all will be enjoying. And now I'd like to hand over the mic to Maliha ma'am, and she'll take forward the session.
Just a second. Before we start the session, I'd like to give you a few pointers. Please maintain the decorum of this session and do not spam the chat section. If you have any queries, please drop them down in the question section. And if other attendees have the same question, you can upvote the questions. We'll try our level best to answer all your queries. So,
yeah, thank you, Anushri and Arpit. I'll be sharing my screen. Just tell me when it's visible.
Okay, ma'am. The screen is visible, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. So good evening, everyone. My name is Maliha Nan, and I'm in my final year of BTech in computer engineering. And I'm the co-organizer at Flutter Valsad. So I've been studying Flutter for quite some time now. And today what we're going to learn is how we can build UI out of using Flutter widgets. So before we get started, what is, as Anushri said, this is the definition that you can get from flutter.dev, that it is Google's UI toolkit for crafting beautiful natively compiled applications for mobile, web, desktop from a single code base. So yes, it was built by Google and it is open source UI toolkit for crafting beautiful natively compiled applications. So making UI is very easy with Flutter, as if you have worked with any other frameworks for mobile development, let's say Java, then you know the difficulties that we face while creating UI, as well, at the same time making it look good as well. So with Flutter, building UI comes very easy. And you just write one single code, and that same code can run on your mobile, your web, and desktop. When we say mobile, it runs on both Android and iOS, so it is cross-platform. It runs on your web as well as desktop. And when we say natively compiled, it means that, let's say, when about any other frameworks which are cross-platform, when we're talking about JavaScript, then we need a JavaScript to convert that JavaScript and to make it able to run on your mobile device. With Flutter, we don't need, and hence your applications will be faster. So today we are going to build a UI, and the image that you see on your screen, that is what we are going to build, a medical app mock demo. And the widgets that are used in this, in some of the widgets that are used in building this application are listed here. So before we get into that, what is a widget? So any Flutter developer will tell you that everything in Flutter is a widget. So by that, what we mean is this text that you see, good morning, Mark, that is a widget. This image that you see of this person, that is a widget. The cards, the list, whatever that you see on the screen, even the itself, the entire screen, that is represented as. So in Flutter, we build our UIs out of these widgets. So you arrange them in hierarchical order to make your UI, your screen. And some of the example of these widgets will be padding, margin, container, and so on. So they are arranged into a tree in a hierarchical fashion, and that's how you can make your UI. Say, for example, that when you see the screen, you can see that this is a card, this green card that you see, right? So that is a card widget that is being used. And inside that are certain texts and this icon. So they are the child widget of this card widget. So you have to arrange them into such a hierarchy in a tree manner. So we'll see how we can do that. And so these are some of the widgets that are most commonly used. When you talk about text, it is used to show text on your screen, padding a certain space around whatever widget you are using. A container is something that contains another widget. So when you want to contain something within another widget and you want to give it certain, let's say, height and width and properties like that. So that is a very basic widget, a container widget. When we talk about column and row, so these are used to arrange containing widgets. So when we talk about column, that will be in a vertical manner, and when we say about row, it will arrange the widgets in a horizontal manner. And when we say list view, it is used to arrange such widgets similar to columns and rows, but you have a scrollable widget over here so that your list items can scroll. Let's say an example, your Instagram app, and you scroll through your feed, right? So the posts that you see, right, all of these elements are arranged in, for example, so you can use a list view over there. Okay, so before we get into the stateful and stateless widget, let's see and how we can build our UI. So to build a UI, I'm going to use Dartpad. So if you want, you can continue. You can do so along with me, or you can just see how it is done and maybe try it out later. I'll share the link of the entire code with you at the end of the session. So generally, to build your applications, you are going to use an IDE, whatever your favorite IDE. I use Visual Studio Code. You can use Android Studio, IntelliJ, whatever IDE you prefer. You will need to install the SDK. So if you want to know how to do that, you can click on this link and you'll be able to follow. So that is very easy to do. And Dartpad is used to write small code snippets to run them on the browser. And it's easy to share your code snippets that way. So, well, I'm going to create a new pad. I'm going to select Flutter. So what's the difference between Dart and Flutter? So your Flutter applications are built using, so it uses the language Dart. So the code that you write will be in the language Dart. Flutter is an SDK, Dart is a language. So yeah, I'm going to create a Flutter application over here. So this is the by default some code that you are going to get the first time that you create this, and let's run that. Okay, so you see hello world over there. Okay, another thing is with Dartpad, when you see over here in documentation on anything that you click, like what is a stateless widget, so you're going to get some documentation over here, so that comes very handy. And this is the console. All right, let's see what's written over here, and let's try to understand that. So the very first statement that you see over here is an import statement. So that is very much like your hash include stdio.h, right? So mainly all of your Dart files, whatever files you write in your Flutter, that is going to contain this import statement. So from the package Flutter, you are importing the file material.dart. So all of these widgets that we talked about, they are built using built using material style guide, and hence the file name is material.dart, and all of your widgets, whichever you will use, those will be defined inside material.dart. Those are defined in a material.dart, and from there we'll be using our widgets. Okay, so then this void main that you can see, that is your entry point of your application, like any main method that you have in most of the languages. This is the entry point, and there we say run app my app. So this is a function to run your application, and we are running my app. So what is my app? So that is extending a stateless widget. So that means that my app is a custom widget that we are building, and that is extending from a widget. So here you can see the word stateless. So we'll get into what is stateful and stateless widget, but yeah, currently we're just making another widget. This is our custom widget. So those classes extending from stateful or stateless widget have to override this method build. So what that is going to return is something that is going to display on your screen. So it is saying that material app. So that is that you are building a material application. You can give some theme, but that is okay. That is optional. I'm going to remove that. Debug show check mode banner. So that is just that if you have it true over here, then you can see this flag, the debug flag. So that is why it's just kept false, so that that does not disturb us. And the home is a scaffold. So what is a scaffold? That is another widget, and when you see its properties, so when you press Control space, you will see the IntelliSense over here, and so it has certain properties like app bar. So what's that? Let's see. It gets an app bar widget. So all of your widgets, whenever you want to declare a widget, you will just you call its constructor, right? And in most of the applications, let's say in Java, you have to write the keyword new, but in Dart, it's okay if you write it, but it's not necessary, so we generally opt out. So as you can see that we got an app bar over here. And when we say in app bar, let's say what attributes you get over there. So something called title. Okay, so let's see that what does title require. So you can't just give it a text, it requires a text widget. So I'm going to wrap my text around a text widget. And then you can give a string or text widget, and that will be displayed over here. So in most of the applications that you build, you require an app bar. You might not require an app bar, but in most applications you do. So that is a convenience that we get an app bar property over here, and you can just define your app bar and its title and there. I mean, if you want, you can create a container, give it a color, you can give it a child text, and it will display something of this sort. But it's not just about the text. I mean, there are various properties that are available over here. The actions that you want, say you want a button over here, or certain elevation that it gets, that is this shadow that you see over here. So that is by default to get that. So things like that, right? So these are there in mostly all of the applications, and that is what we call a scaffold, that's something to build upon. And that is what the scaffold widget is. Another property that it has is a floating action button. And when we say a button, then the on pressed property is required. So I'm going to give that. And you can see a button over here. So floating action buttons are also a very common design pattern in most of the applications. So hence that property as well you get over here. Okay, and the body of your application, so what will be displayed in this body part? So that is my widget. Again, that is another custom widget that we will be building out of stateless widget. And the build method returns just a text and a style of this particular theme. So by default, you have some theme defined inside your material app, and from that we are using the style, but we can also give our custom style over here. We can use a text style widget, and it has certain properties. As you can see, let's say color. So when you want to define a color, you use the colors class, and it has certain colors predefined. Let's use something like red. And you can see that the text has turned red. So this is how you can use these widgets. Now, when we talk about stateful and stateless widgets, what are they? So this my app is a stateless widget. That is because it is all very static. But you can have a stateful widget. So what is stateful widget is it has certain state, and that state can change. So I'm going to use another default code that is there, the counter application. So when you first create your application, let's say in Visual Studio Code, this is the code that you are going to get. The counter application, that is the default code which is there. So when I press this button, the state over here, that is the text over here, changes. And how does that happen is inside, so my home page that is there, this time it is not a stateless widget, it is a stateful widget. This line is just a constructor to get the title from over here. So that is okay, but the thing is that we have another method that is create state, which is creating this particular state, my home page state, which is extending from the state widget of the type of your stateful widget, my home page. And inside that is our build method, which has the code for your app bar, and this is a text. You can see that the text of underscore counter variable, that is this variable which is initialized to 0, that is displayed over here. And your action button, whenever you press that, the method increment counter is called. So increment counter has this something written inside that is saying set state underscore counter plus plus. So when you say set state, your changes will be reflected on your screen. Let's say if I remove this, if I still increment my counter, but if I don't set my state, then what will happen? So if I press it, my counter variable will change, but it won't be affected. It won't be shown over here. Let's say in my increment count. So let's say that you increment the counter every time, but only I'm incrementing the counter every time I press the floating action button, but I will change my state only when the counter modulo 2 equals to 0. So when I press the button one time, it won't show, but on 2 it will show. On 3 it won't show, on 4 it will show. So that means your variable value is getting changed, but it won't be reflected until you call the method set state. So that is just used to reflect your state on the screen. So that is about the default code that you get. And now let's start building our application. So this is the UI that we are going to build. And so this will be our app, right? We will use a scaffold, and inside that, what widgets are we going to use? Okay, another widget that you need to be aware about is custom paint. That is also a widget that we are going to use today. So with custom paint, what you can do is you have a canvas and you can draw on that canvas. Like in your HTML, you draw on your canvas, right? You can draw circles and arcs and paths on your canvas. So that is something similar. Flutter offers you a custom paint widget. So that is used to draw this blue shape that you see, this arc that you see. So that can be built using your custom paint. So with custom paint, whatever you paint on the canvas, that will be a background. And on the foreground, you can have your other default widgets, whichever you want. So first we will have that custom paint widget, and we will draw this background, and on top of it we are going to arrange these widgets. So how are they going to be arranged? Okay, this application, this entire thing, you can see that this is a column widget. How is it a column? Because it is arranged in vertical fashion, and so this entire be a column which will have different children. So the children will be, one is this particular children, this child. So that is a row. Why is it a row? Is because it has this text and this icon both, and they are arranged horizontally. So that way you can differentiate it. Yeah, this is a row. Then this thing that you see over here, these two cards, they are again arranged in a horizontal manner. So they can be a row, but we'll be implementing them as a list view so that you can scroll through and you can have more such cards in the list. Then you can see this part. So your text over here, your daily medication text, that will be one child, and this entire list will be one child. So they are arranged in a column as well. And this, what you see, metformin, Trulicity, all these medicines, they'll be arranged in a list view. So a list view does not necessarily have to be in vertical manner. Like you have a list over here, which is vertical, the walking, swimming, the activity part, but it can scroll horizontally too. So just have to define this property of scroll direction, and you will get a horizontally or vertically scrolling list. So similarly, if you can, so this is a list. Then if you see this card, so these cards, I'm not sure if it's very clearly visible. Let's talk about this card. So here again, it will be a card widget, and the children, they are arranged vertically. So that will be a column. Then there is another row inside, which represents this heart icon and the text. So that is a row. and then the children of the row will be the icon and the text. The children of the column will be a row, a text, and another text. Similarly, over here you will have two rows. So this is your card widget. This is one row, and these are the two children, right? This is the icon and this is the text. Then again, this particular child, that will also be a row, among which one of this will be a column and one will be an icon. So that is how we can arrange your widgets. So let's start building so it will be more clear to you. So let's start with the custom paint widget and start building this. So we have some code over here. Let's remove this thing. Okay, so to build that custom paint widget, you have a widget custom paint, and its properties, what properties it has, let's see. So it has a child and a painter. So painter will be, you can give it any name. So I'm going to call it a top curve paint. So that's going to paint our top curve. So now it's giving an error because this painter hasn't been defined. So we have to make another class of the same name, which is going to extend custom painter. And now it shows the error that the paint and should repaint methods are necessary to be implemented in a custom painter. So let's implement them. So we have one method, the paint method, which receives a canvas and a size, and another method which is a should repaint method, which is returning a Boolean value. And that should do. So now the should repaint method, what that is when you are using your animations at certain intervals, whenever you call the painter, you want to paint your screen again so that the changes are reflected. But our screen will be static right now, so we will be returning false. That is, we don't want again and again. Once it is done, and that is going to stay how it is. Now the paint method, so that is receiving a canvas and a size. So what the size is when in custom paint, if you see, there will be an attribute of size. So when you give your size, you can give a size over here. So when you don't have a child, you can give a size widget, you can give its width and height, and it will paint in that particular size. So you can access the height width of the canvas using this size attribute. But we will have a child with this custom paint, and we will so when you have a child over here, let's say a container. So when you have a child over here, the custom paint widget, it will take the size of your child, whatever it is. That's why we're not defining the size, and we will get that size over here. Okay, so now let's paint something. So we want to make this arc over here, right? So to do that, we are going to use a path. We are going to draw a path. So we will define a path, and let's define a path. Okay, now this path, I'm going to move to this 0, 0 position over here. After that, we can line through position over here. So this X, so we'll be having two coordinates, right? Our X and our Y. So the X can remain 0. Y will be determined from the height of the screen. So path has another method, line to, and we will be lining it to 0 and size and the height into 0.2. So that is just a trial and error thing. And okay, so that it is visible, let me give this path some color and a style. Okay. So the path does not have these properties, but widget called paint has it. Let's say stroke for now, and a stroke width. Okay. So up until now, we have moved our path, but it won't be because we haven't drawn it. We have to actually draw this path on our canvas. There should be a method to draw which receives, as you can see, a path value and a paint value. So the path will be the path and the paint. So what I'm trying to do is take the entire height and width of the screen so that we can see this path over here. Okay. Okay. So this red line that you see, right? So our path moved to the 0, 0 point, and then we lined it to 0 and size.height into 0.2. So that is this. Now what we are going to do is, I was over here, I lined it to this part. Now I want to go to this point using this point, this center point. So for that we have a method quadratic bezier tool in your path. Okay, so you define your, so this is, let's say this is your point A, this is your point B, and this is your C. So first define the xy of your B and then the xy of your C. So B is in the center when you talk about x, so the size dot width by 2, and a height variable that is going to height by 3. So those are the two values for your B point. And for the C point, we take the entire width and the height into 0.2, like we gave it over here, right? This same value. So now we can see that we went from here to here. So the B point has to be defined first and the C point. So this means that we are going to see through B from A. Okay, so now we're going to again use the line to method, and we are going to go to the top right corner, right? So for that, we will have size dot width, and the height is going to be 0, right? So because this point you have on the top left corner will be your 0, 0, and this point will be size dot width 0. All right, and then you can just call the method path dot close, and that will close your path. That is, that will draw a line to the starting point. Okay, but we don't want it stroke, we want it filled, and we want a color that is this blue color. So we can find the color directly, but I'm going to create another class for it. So this class I'm going to call app colors, and it has some static defined values of colors. So these are the colors that we're going to use. So when you want to define a color, you can just use the color, and in its constructor, you can give it a hex value. So these are hex values of colors, and because they are static, we will be able to refer it from the app colors itself. So instead of giving the red color over here, I'm going to say app colors dot blue. Instead of stroke, you can give it fill, and then we don't need a stroke width. You don't even need to give it the fill value. By default, it will fill it. So now we can see that we have this blue thing that we wanted, right? Okay, along with that, we also want this circle. The circle that you see over here, a shadow of a circle. So for that, again, in our canvas method itself, we have a method to draw a circle. As you can see, it requires an offset, a radius, and a paint properties. So the offset, you can give it with an offset widget. So the offset, we want it to be somewhere over here. So I can give it size dot width minus 50. So 50 from the right hand side. And for height, we can just give it 50. So that is our offset. A radius, let's say 70, and a paint method and a paint widget. So paint, and we just will give it a color. So we will say black. So colors have this property of a function of with opacity. So you can give it certain opacity. So I'm using a black color with a very less opacity. And you can see this circle over here. Okay, so that was our curve painter. And now let's start building this widget. Okay, so this theme thing I'm going to remove because we don't want a dark blue theme. We want a white itself, right? So yeah. So now on top of this custom paint, we can start building our widgets. So first of all, we are going to require a column. So in my body, I'm going to remove this center. And so before using the column itself, we can see that there is some space over here, right? This space, whatever you see over here, over here. So that is some padding which is there. So for that, again, we have a padding widget. So all that takes is, let's see what it takes. So it takes a child, a key, a padding. So we will give it a padding, and let's see what that, let's see the documentation of this padding. So it takes an edge insets geometry. So if I type edge insets dot all, that is on all sides, we want a padding of, let's say, 32. And then the child is going to be a column widget, as we talked about, that all these rows and the lists, they are arranged in a columnar fashion. So most of the widgets that you write, to create a hierarchy, you create a widget, and then you have a child property with another widget. But for column, we can have multiple children. So for that, we don't have a child property, we have a children property. Okay. So now to create this row, I can either create it directly, but I am going to create another widget for it. Let's name it title. Okay, I have been writing it over here. Let's remove it from here. We have to write it in our widget, right? Okay, so this padding, I can wrap it within my container, giving it a height and width so that it takes the full area. But we're not going to do that because I can instead wrap the padding in a safe area. Let's see. Okay, that is okay. When we will build our widgets, we will take the entire width and height. So this thing will be automatically arranged. Yeah, so we are going to build our title widget. So title, it extends from stateless widget. So because it is a widget, it has to override the build method, right? So let's override that. And the build method returns a widget, so we have to return something. So we'll be returning a row. So before a row, we will require some padding for it. So we will give padding, and this time instead of using edgeinsets.all, I'm using edgeinsets.symmetric. So symmetric is used for, if we see over here, the properties that it has, it's vertical and horizontal. So that's just the vertical padding, just top and bottom, or just horizontal, just the sideways padding that we can give. So we have a child. The child, we are going to use a row widget. So we have two children, right? The text and this image. So we are going to use the text. The text is good morning, Mark. And we have some style that we can give to this text. Okay. So for this image, you can use a circle avatar. That is another widget that you get to show circular profile pictures or things like that. So that has a property of background image, and I'm going to use a network image over here. So that is an image that is coming from a URL. And this is the URL that I have. So this is the image that we are going to use, right? So as you can see that this is the text and this is the circle avatar that we used. So first of all, let's give our text some style. So as we saw that we can have a style attribute over here, and then we can use a text style attribute over here. But instead of doing that, I'm going to, again, like our app colors class, I'm going to create another class of app styles, and I'm going to define some styles over there so that we can reuse those styles. So I'm just pasting app styles class. So it has certain text styles defined. This light bold text, so, and the dark texts. So we have text style, the color we are giving it white, a font size, a font weight we are making it bold, and some letter spacing to make it look good. So I'll say app styles dot Okay, so our text look good, right? Now in row, what we have is this main axis alignment. And if I say main axis alignment dot center, and we'll shift this entire thing to center, right? If I say end, then we'll shift it to end. What we are going to use is space between. So that is, it will space these widgets on both the ends with some space in between. If we had another text over here, let's say, then it would have spaced it evenly with some space in between. We also have something called space around. And what that does is leave certain space on the left and the right as well, like with some padding and the equal space between these widgets. We are just going to use space between. When you click on this format button, it will just make the indentations proper. Okay, so we have our title. Now the next thing after the title, what we want is this cards, right? So that is arranged in a list view widget, and in the list view we have these cards. So for that, again, I am going to, instead of writing it over there, we are going to create another widget for it, and I'm going to call it status list. So after the title, another child that we'll have is status list. So our status list, it extends stateless widget. And like our title, it will have an overrided build method. Okay. So again, our status list, we want to have some padding around that, right? So I'm going to give it again the similar vertical padding. And the child, we can give it a list view. But if I write a list view directly, okay. So if I write a list view directly, we will get some script error. That will be more detailed if you use an IDE. But yeah, so why we get this error is because list view is something that will scroll through. So for other widgets, it is your height and width, that in what area you have to draw, that is very well defined. Like when you write good morning mark and it has certain font size, it knows that, okay, it will take this much space. With list view, it can be an infinitely long list and it does not know how much space it has to take. So that's why our list view has to be wrapped in some height and width. So I'm going to wrap it inside a container. Now the status list will be the child of a column. So that is that it can have whatever height. The width it can take to be the maximum. So height, I'm going to give it, let's say 120, and the child, our list view. So now it does not give an error. But if I only give it a width and not a height, then it will give an error. Because width it can take the maximum, it does not know about height. Let's say if we had used a row over here, then for row it only needs the width, that yeah, okay, I'm only going to use this much amount of width, and the height, it can take the maximum height that the row has. That's why we need to give a height attribute over here, so that the list view knows what height it has to scroll through the elements. All right. Now the list view that we are having, it requires a horizontal scroll direction. So by default, the scroll direction is vertical, but if you want, you can define that we want it to scroll horizontally. So for that, we can define this property of scroll direction, which is axis dot horizontal, so that it will scroll horizontally. And we have children over here, so that we will have these cards. So let's just write some text and let's okay, so we have these texts arranged in a horizontal fashion. Okay, so instead of these texts, what we want is these cards. So for those cards, again, I'm going to create another widget that is called status card, and that will have some properties, right? So we will be doing the same card for this green card and this yellow card. So you can see that we require some color that is different for both. We have some icon, the title of the card, this value, and the unit value, right? So all of these properties we are going to have for our status card. So let's first of all, let's override this build method. And we can give this, we can define some final properties over here: icon, title, value, unit, and bg color. Now because they are final, we get an error that they need to be initialized. So we will create a constructor and we will initialize these values over there. So with that, when you write it inside this curly braces, if you write your properties like that, it means that these are required and named properties, right? So when you can write your status card over here, you can get these, right? So the title, whatever you want, the unit, and everything that can be written. So the icon is this, the title, value, unit, and the background color. So that is just to initialize this status card. Now in build method, what we are going to return is this will be a card, right? So we will create a card widget. So what is a card widget is it will, it's like a container, but it has some rounded borders. Like you can see some rounded borders over here, right? So that it has some shadow that it you can see. So it gives a look and feel like a card. So for that we have that widget. Now to our card, I can give some margin, that is some space outside the card, and inside in the child, I can give some padding, that is the space outside the content of this card. So I'll give it a padding of 16. And the child is going to be a column. Okay. Now this card, the color, we can see that we have passed that property of color, right? So I am going to say this dot bg color, and it will give us that color of the card. So you can see that this green thing we can see, right? Let's define another card, a yellow card as well, so that we'll be able to see it. Okay, so now first property that it takes is the icon property, and that is the icon data. So when you want to define an icon, when you want to draw an icon, you have something called an icon data. That is the icon, which icon you want. So for the icon, you don't need to use any image. From material library, we have certain icons defined, and those are inside this icons class. Like your colors dot, you can use different colors. So likewise, we have some ready-made icons that you can also use. So that is what this icons is. These three values, title, value, and unit, are your text values, and your background color is your color. So that will be your color over here. Okay, so now inside your column, what you want is, first of all, there is a row, and then there are two other text values. Okay, so in the row, first of all, we have an icon, right? And the icon class, it takes the icon data value over here. So I'm going to say this dot icon. So the icon that we're getting in our constructor. And let's see. So we are able to see this icon, right? But we are going to change the size. We can change the size and the color of this icon. Let's do that. Okay. So after the icon, what we want is text, right? So we will use a text widget. And the text, again, we have it in our this dot title. And we can have some style. So that will be app styles dot, okay, dark light text. So that is just a smaller text with a dark color. Okay, and we can see that, but there needs to be some spacing between this. So we can either wrap one of these in padding and give it just padding of one side, that is just the right side of the icon. Or what we can do is we can use something called a sized box. And give it a width of, let's say, 8. So size box is just used for create very easy for you to use when you want to create some padding or space between two widgets. So it has two properties, width and height. You can give both, or we can use just one property right now. That is what we need, some width. Okay. So now after this row, we have two other text boxes, right? So before those text boxes as well, let's give it some size box with some height. So when you want to format your code, that is when you want to make it with proper indentation, it is very important that you use your commas well. That is, even if even though this style value, if you see, if it is a last property, it's not necessary to give this comma. It is okay if you don't. But if you want it to be automatically indented, it is necessary that you give this comma. Okay, so after your row, we are going to add some size box of height 12 and two text boxes. So whatever the value that we are receiving in the constructor and the style of it. Okay, but the text we want it to be over here. So we will use it, the axis alignment that we used, right? So instead of center, we can use it on the left side. But this is for the column. That is for your column, all your children that you have, you want to arrange it on the left hand side. So this axis that is there, right? So on this horizontal axis, you want to arrange it to a side. So for column, the horizontal axis won't be a main axis, it will be a cross axis. So hence you will use something called cross axis alignment instead of main axis alignment. And we can say dot start. So for both your rows and your column, you have two properties. One is your main axis alignment and one is your cross axis alignment. Main axis is the axis of the widget, that is for column. It will be a vertical, right? A vertical line, that will be a main axis, and horizontal, that will be a cross axis. And for row, it is vice versa. Okay, so that gives us our status list. Let's see if we can add some more status cards, then we can scroll through it. So you can see this is a scrollable list that we are getting. Okay, my browser is a little bit slow at responding, but if you will run this code, you'll see that we get a nice scrollable list. Okay, so right now we only want these two cards. I'm going to remove the extra ones. Okay, so after this status card thing, we will use this medication. So we will need a list for this medications. But over here, if you see, this is what we are going to draw is, first of all, a column. And in that column will be two children. This text that you see, your daily medications, right? The heading, whichever that is there. So that will be one child, and your list of medicines will be another child. So similar to status list that we had, we are going to use a medication list. So we'll be creating another widget for that named medication list. So let's do that. Okay, before I continue, do you have any questions? I forgot to see that, sorry. Okay.
Ma'am, there are a few questions in the chat.
Yeah. So why are we using final, and why can't we just use string, int, or something else? Why final? So that is just because why you would use final in any other language as well. It is okay if you don't use final, but our properties are not going to change, and hence we are defining them as final. So that is just good code practice. Okay, what is dot dot doing in paint? Okay, so that is this paint class. It has some property of color. That is what we want to set this value. So that is just a syntax of Dart. This is how you can set this property. Can we use NetBeans for this? I'm not sure if NetBeans has an extension for Flutter. Maybe you can search it on your browser, or you can see if it has an extension for Flutter. I'm not sure if it does. Okay, I guess those are all the questions.
There's another question, ma'am. It's saying, ma'am, not using final is showing a warning.
Okay, let's see what happens when we don't use a final. Okay, over here. Okay, so it says that this class is marked as immutable, but one or more of its instances aren't final. Okay, so when we talk about stateless widget, we know that the stateless widgets are used when we want to create something static. That is, it should not change. So that's why these stateless widgets are decorated with an immutable attribute. So that means that the properties inside cannot change. So that is just a warning again, which means that you can make use non-final properties over here, but you should use final. Why? It's because these are not going to change once they are declared, once they are defined. They are not going to change, and they cannot change because that is a stateless widget. So if you somewhere over here change your title value, it is not going to be reflected because these stateless widgets don't have a method of set state that you can use. When we saw in our counter application that we have a set state method and your state is reflected on your screen, right? So that is only available to stateful widgets and not stateless widgets. So when you, even if you change these values, those are not going to be reflected. When you want changeable values, you are going to use stateful widgets. So that's why these stateless widgets, they have this immutable property, because of which the properties cannot change, and hence it is good practice to name it final. So that is why it gives a warning. Okay, I guess those are all the questions. Yeah, so back to our medication list, let's define the build method for it. Okay, so what we want is a column, right? But before that column, we will give it some padding as usual. We will give it a vertical padding of 16, and then its child we can give as column. So the first thing is just your text. So your daily medication text and some style to it. And then we have this list, right? The medication list. So for that, we will create again cards like we created for this status cards. We will be creating medication cards. So again, we want this your daily medications to be printed on the left side. So we can use cross-axis alignment like we used before. And then we can have medicards over here. So again, that this widget called Medicard, which extends a stateless widget, and it has these properties. Final again, icon, time, title, amount, and whether it is done or not. And those we are setting in the constructor. And we should have a build method. Okay. So those are again cards with some margin and some padding. So that is similar to what we did. But before we get into that, let's return a container or something. Okay. In this image, you can see that there is some drawing over here as well that you can see. So for that, again, I have used a custom paint, like we painted a circle over here. So similar to that, we are going to paint this arc. So for that, I'm going to create another painter widget. So we created this top curve painter. So similar to that, we can have a, what I will call it as a bubble painter or something like that. And this one will also have some color as a property, because we want that same thing to be used in this card, and with different colors. So we will give it some final color and we will define it in our constructor. Okay. So now we will again need the path like we did before, paint. So this time the paint that we are going to use is, instead of blue, we will use the color whichever is given with an opacity. So yeah, when you define these values over here in the constructor, you can give a default value as well. So when the color property is not passed, you will have it set to black. So that is just a default value that we are giving. Okay. Now, because it is it is defined, this painter, it is defined within this class, within this card, we will be using within this card. The 00 will correspond to the top left point of the card itself and not the entire screen. So when I say move to 00, it means we are moving over here. Then we will line to, so similar to this thing, right? We will line to from 00, we will move to 0, let's say 70 or something. Then we will point it through 70, 70 to 70, 0, right? For the height, we will give it 0. Okay, so we were on our painter thing, and yeah. So instead of this whole thing, I'm going to write it that. So we move to this 0, 0, then we go to 0, 70, then we go to 70, 70, 70, 0 through 70, 70 using quadratic p0. That is the same thing that we used for this part. And then we can just close the path. And then we draw the path. Okay. So let's use this bubble painter somewhere so that we can see what it is doing. So in our status card, right? Okay, now a status card, instead of the child to be the padding, I'm going to say the child is the bubble painter. So not the bubble painter, right? We will require a custom paint widget over here. And the property of the child is going to be this entire padding thing. And the painter property will be the bubble painter. So now we can see that there is some arc, some blackish arc that you can see. So that is what our bubble painter has done. So that similar painter we will be using for our medicard as well. So in the medicard, we will use a card, and again we will give it some margin, and the child will be the custom paint whose child will be the padding. So we have some margin, we have the child which is the custom paint child whose painter is the bubble painter, and another child over here that is the padding. Now the child of this padding is going to be, so this card we have, let's zoom it. So for this card, we have a column. We have this column inside which we will have this one row, which will have an icon and a text, and this will be the below part, that will be another row with one column. That is this thing that we see, that will be a column, and this another thing will be an icon, and for this column we will have two text boxes. So let's do that over here. So inside the padding, first of all, what we will require is a column. But to this column, I want to give certain width. We don't just want it to be whatever the inside takes. We want it to be a little bit wide, right? For this one, we were okay with just the width of whatever the content is. For this particular card, I want it to be a little more wider, and hence I'll be wrapping it within a container. So the width, I'll give it 180, and the child will be a column. Okay, so this column has children of, so first of all we have a row. Okay, we have a little less time, so I'm just going to copy paste certain code and will of course explain what we have done. Okay, so to use this, to see what the Medicard does, we'll have to use it somewhere, right? So below this text, your daily medication, I'm going to use another some size box to give a padding, and then we are using a container with some height inside which we will have a list view. Why do we need a container again? The same reason. The list view won't know how much it can scroll through if we don't give it some height. The scroll direction of this list view is going to be horizontal, and we are going to give the children as these Medicard values. Okay, so you can see that because we use this custom paint widget in the Medicard, we are getting this bluish shade over here. Then we have our column, then we have our row. So this very first row, that is what we just pasted. So that is having a child as an icon and a child as a text. So that is what we have. Now after that, we can see that we have another row over here, right? So we are going to have another row, and that row again has a child of column. Okay, so this is the row which has a child of column. This column, it has another two texts over here. So that is the text that is defined, and then the row has another child as the icon. So that is what is defined over here. Now the main axis alignment of the row is spaced between, because we want this text and this icons to be spaced between. The column has the axis cross axis alignment to start, because we want the text to be left aligned, and this icon. So now what is done over here is something that is what we call as ternary operator that is used over here. So that is similar to other languages. So this done value that is there, that is a Boolean value. So what it will check is if it is done, if the medication has been taken, then we will use a check circle, that is a filled circle icon. Otherwise, we will use a check circle outline. Now, if you want to know what icons to use, you can just search for material icons. The link should give you these icons on material design, and you can search for the icon that you want to, and the same name will be used in this icons. So you can use, so let's say you want to use an icon of heart or something. So you can just filter it over here. You can search for it and you will get the options. So these are the icons which are there, right? So, and the names which are there over here. So that's how we can know what icon to use when. So that is what I have used, and you can do the same. Okay, let's run this to see what it gives. So that is it, right? Our cards have been built and they are scrolling horizontally because our list view has been given the property of horizontal. So that is with the medication list. Now, similar to the medication list, we will have this activity list. So over here, I'm going to use the activity list and we will build the activity list class. Okay, so what we want this activity list to return is again some padding along with a column. So that is, we have some padding, some vertical padding that we gave 16, and then we have a column of this one text and this list view. So one text I'm going to give, and then I'm going to give certain space. A text and then a size box that will give certain space between that and the list view. Again, we want to use the list view, so we will give some height and then we can use the list view. So this time what height we want to use, that we can give it a certain fixed value as we did for our both the other list. What I want is for any screen size it should work, right? It should be responsive. So whatever the remaining height that is there, I'm going to calculate that and I'm going to give that as the height. So for that we have something called media query. So when you use this media query of context, that is this build context that is getting dot size dot height, that will give you the entire height, and 525 is the height of this. So that is just, that was trial and error to get the remaining height. Okay, so that is how our list view will know in which region it can scroll through. And to have these, what we'll call it as an activity card that we are going to build. So activity card, again, it will have some properties that are defined in the constructor. So we have an icon, title, name, and how much part it has completed. So this widget that you see over here, the green thing, so that is a linear progress indicator. That is also a widget that is available, and that requires the value of how much it is completed. So that should be in the range of 0 to 1. So that is the double value that we are using for completed over here. Okay, so now to build this widget, again, we have a card with some and some padding and a row widget with the icon. And for this, we have a column widget for the text and then the linear progress indicator. And for to separate this walking and 750 steps, we have a row. And also for this pinkish bubble that you can see, I'm not sure if you are able to see that, but if you can, so that is the custom paint, the similar one that we used over here, color given as pink. So yeah, let's give our build method over here, which will return a card with a custom paint. So we have a card. Okay, so the properties that you can see over here, elevation color. So that is just to give it more elevated. That is to give more shadow. And you can even define the color of the shadow that you want, but that is okay. We'll omit it for now. The margin that we have 8 as we use other cards as well. And then we have a custom paint widget, the same bubble paint with a color of red this time. And then some padding for the content within the card. And the child of the card, that is a row. So the row, the first of the row, that is your icon widget, right? So the icon that we have given in the constructor, the same one we are going to use over here. And the other child of the row is going to be a column. So before that, we will give a certain space. So this time we are using size box with a width. So that will give some space between the icon and the text that is written. Again, so we want it to be enough wide, and we want it responsive. So you can use the media query of width, and you can get the width of this entire thing and then separate out the width of the remaining part, and you can get how wide you want this entire container to be, because the linear progress indicator also requires some width to know in what part it can draw it. So that's why I'm going to give a container with a width of the entire width of the screen minus 160. That is just calculated via. Okay, so now we have another column over here, right? So I'm going to give a column with a cross-axis alignment of start, because text to be written to the start. Okay, so the first is going to be a row with 2 text elements. So that I'm going to paste over here. So with main axis size is max. So that is that within this range, the entire size you want to take up. If your row does not automatically take up the entire size, then you can give this property of main axis size. Then the alignment, you can keep space between, because we have this text, both the texts with some space between it. We have these 2 texts with the styles that we have defined in the app styles. That is the row that we have. Now, after this row, we want the linear progress indicator. So that is again another widget. Okay, so before we go into that, let's define our activity card over here so that we know what it's looking like. Okay, so now after we want our linear progress indicator. So let's see what that gives. So when you just say linear progress indicator, it will give you a linear progress indicator. And this blue line, as you can see, it is animated, and it will just keep on animating this if you don't give any other. So let's first give some space before. So I'm going to use a sized box for it again. And let's see what values this indicator has, properties it has. So one property is the value. So that value we can use from this dot completed, right? So that is where we want the to stop. Then you have something called value color. So that is, instead of this blue line, what color you want. So we want it to be green, but if we cannot just give it colors dot something. As we can see in the documentation, it requires an animation color, because this entire thing is animated, right? It's not a static value, it is an animated color that it wants. So now we don't want it to animate, so we are going to use something called always stopped animation, and inside that we are going to give a color of green color that we have defined inside the app colors class. So that we have over here. Now after that, we can give it some background as well and some height for this linear progress indicator. And okay, so that shows over here, right? So this is again a scrollable list that we have created. If we have multiple of these, it'll scroll through this region. Let's format this. So for this column, we didn't give a cross-axis alignment, right? Because the schedule activity should be on the left-hand side. So for that, we are going to give a cross-axis alignment dot start over here. Okay, and we can see that it is to the left-hand side. So now because we use the media query and everything, your UI will be very responsive. That is, for whatever width and height, it will work, and the scrollable lists, and that is the UI that we were supposed to build. So if you can see, even if for a wider screen, that is even for want to make a web application or a desktop application, this is how your UI will look. Okay, that is all I had. Let me see if I have any questions. Yeah, okay, no questions. Yeah, so that was what I had. If you have any questions, you can drop it on the question section.
Ma'am, actually, I have a few beginner questions from our team's end, and we're all thank you for the insightful session, first of all. But when we're beginning app development, generally students have in mind, do we straight away go with Flutter, or do we start with some other things? Like, do we straight away start app development with the help of Flutter, or do something else? Like, is it a good idea to use Flutter?
I'll say that yes, it is a good idea to just begin with Flutter itself. Now, all these other frameworks that you have, right? Java, that is very popularly used for Android development. After Java, now we have Kotlin, so that is also very well used. Then we have these JavaScript frameworks, right? We have React Native, so even that can be used, and even Flutter can be used. Now, you don't need to have knowledge of Java or app development in Java to get started with Flutter. It is very different experience to build an app in Java and in Flutter. So with Flutter, I mean, it is very easy to begin with. The language Dart. So if you are aware with any object-oriented programming language, like let's say Java or C Sharp, then Dart comes very handy. There are a few features here and you learn as you grow, but to start with, Dart isn't so hard to learn. And when we build widgets like this, right, when you just write text and shows up on your screen, so it is very easy with Flutter that way. So yeah, as a beginner, I'll say that Flutter is even easier than other frameworks that are there, so you can begin with Flutter directly. There are some code labs that Flutter has itself to begin with, or there are certain courses like there is a course on App Brewery that is offered by Google itself, a free course. So if you want to get started with Flutter, you can use that. And yeah, it'll be easier with Flutter.
Any prerequisites for beginning with Flutter, like the things we should know beforehand?
So there is no such prerequisite. It's a language Dart, so it is good to know somewhat of what Dart is. I started with Flutter, I did not know of that. I knew Java, I knew C#, so I was aware with the object orientation, whatever the features that object orientation has, right? All of that I was aware of. So for me, it wasn't so hard to get used to that. But yeah, it is good if you know that. You can just begin with Flutter directly. There are no such prerequisites. Aware with some coding and obviously these object orientation concepts before you begin with. But if you are someone who regularly, if you are a C, let's say of second or third year, then yeah, you can just start with Flutter. There are no such prerequisites.
Okay, so we'll be opening the stage to audience now. If anyone has any question, they can raise their hand and we can invite them to stage.
Okay.
From the audience, if anyone has any question, if you're not comfortable with the mic, you can drop it in chat or in the questions panel. We're also live on YouTube if we have some questions there. React Native versus Flutter. What are the pros and cons?
Okay, so if you are a JavaScript developer, then React will be very easy for you, right? Obviously, it will be very easy because it uses JavaScript. One JavaScript is that the applications will be a little bit slower than Flutter because of the JavaScript bridge that I talked about. It requires a bridge in between to convert that JavaScript to something that is going to run on your mobile devices. So that is something that you can look for. And there are obviously pros and cons of these all these frameworks. One thing is that in industry, React Native has been used for quite some time now for cross-platform applications. Is one pro that React Native could have, that it could have more demand. But right now, if you see, even for Flutter developers, there is a lot of demand for Flutter developers as well. So I might not include that as a con. Yeah, any other questions? Also, like when we talk about comparing these, so when you want to compare React Native and Flutter, we are comparing because it is cross-platform, right? So, but when you compare it with native development, Android development in Java or Kotlin, so there, why Flutter should be used is because it is cross-platform, right? You can build from the single code base; it can run on Android as well as on Java. That's not possible. But then with Java, your applications will be much more built for your Android OS, right? So that will be even much faster. And your application size, if you see, the ones that you build with Flutter, a lot of difference there. So obviously, native development is better when we compare that whether Java will be good or Flutter. But the development time that you take, that is much Flutter, and that's why it is gaining such popularity.
There's a question, ma'am. What would we be missing if we follow Flutter instead of the native languages like Kotlin and Java?
Yeah, so that is one thing that I said, that for Java, it is built right for your Android, so your applications could be much focused and much your Android. Another thing with Flutter is that when you build your application, right, and you say that it works for both Android and iOS, this UI say that what we built, it is going to run on both Android and iOS. But what happens is there are certain look and feel that we have in for Android and for iOS. Like let's say the buttons that scroll up from the below, right? For iOS, that is what the general UI UX feel is. So if you want your app to look very native, you will have to define both of these things for Android and iOS. Like you can have the ternary operator that we use, right? So something of that sort, that if it is Android, then you want it to look like this. If it is iOS, then you want to look like this. But if you are building an application that you don't care about, that it should look and feel native, then the same code base is going to run for both Android and iOS. So what you're going to miss is native build look and feel that you get directly with these with Java or Kotlin. That is what you are going to miss. Also, your application size is going to be a bit larger. obviously better. When you talk about your application itself, the native is obviously better, but with Flutter, the development time is much less, and it is very easy as well.
There's another question by Ritik. Ma'am, how can I build APK file from this code, show it to my friends, host on web, or make desktop app?
Okay, so to build the APK from Dartpad, you can't do that. So you'll have to install the SDK. You can run the same code on your IDE. Let's say Visual Studio Code, you can run this same code over there, and you can debug it on your phone or an emulator. So those steps you can find online, or it's just you need to enable the debugging option in your phone, and then it can. And there is a command flutter build apk. With that, you will be able to build the apk from this code. Now when you build an application, so this is just a code snippet that we build. This is just a convenience thing, the dartpad.dev. So this is just a convenience thing that it is easy for me to show you the output as well on screen. So that's why we were using this Dartpad. But when you want to build an application, you're not going to build it on Dartpad, right? You will be building it in an IDE. And then you will have many more files, like you will have your pubspec.yaml, where you can define what fonts you want to use, or your local images that you want to use. That things you can't do on Dartpad. So when you'll be using an IDE, you will be building an entire application. Flutter Create will create an application for you. Your main.dart is where you will write all this code, not just your main.dart, right? You'll have multiple files. And then in your app folder, you can run the command flutter build apk, and the apk will be generated.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? I guess there's no other questions. So we'll wind up the session. So thank you everyone for joining us today. It was a great session, and I hope every one of us learned something from this. And obviously, I'm inspired to begin with Flutter going on, and there are many developers sitting here between us, especially from first and second year. Thank you, Maliha ma'am, for having a session with us. And to all the audience, I'd like to say we are in the week of MAKEATHON, and we are having sessions daily. So tomorrow we'll be having with us Mr. Sanket Singh from CodeChef at 1 p.m. It's a Sunday, and it will be a workshop on DSA. Most of you are interested in perspective of placement, especially. So we hope you'll be joining us tomorrow as well, and we hope you learned a lot from this session. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Maliha.
Thank you for having me.